Okay, so this week I'm going to be recording with Vintage Bugfish, which I think is one of the two contenders for the pre-Dak Faden best deck in the format. I don't know if deck has changed a little bit, but I think that before Dak came out, this deck was pretty handily the reigning champ next to Shops. If you want to break it down, you have 17 lands, which, if you look at legacy lists, is probably on the higher end of lands. And that's kind of because you have a lot more mana intensive things to do in this deck because you can afford to. Because guess what? Your lands are free. You can play 4 drops in this format, unlike Legacy. So, a couple other things to point out. No off-color Moxes. That's because the mana in this deck, because of Death Rights, Snapcaster, Spell Pierces, 1 mana interaction like Thoughtseize, Abrupt Decay costing black-green. You can see all these things like the blue, a lot of cheaper blues. The off-color mana is not as important. I think it might be possible that you want some more other off-color moxes, like 1 or 2 off-color moxes. I guess your only other options are 1 or 2 more, but you don't want like Soul Ring or whatever. But 1 or 2 more, I could see. I think some of that might be a holdover from when the deck played a bunch of Null Rods. You'll also notice there are no Black Lotuses in the deck. As you can see from the deck, there is nothing that actually costs real amounts of mana besides the 1 Jace that you sometimes tutor for. So Lotusing, not super powerful. The rest of the lands, you have 7 fetches, which is a little more than you necessarily need in a vintage deck, but that's because you have Death Rights. And then you have 2 of each fetch, or 2 of each jewel to fetch at least, so you can fetch and get Wastelanded and then fetch another and not care. It's also worth noticing that the way your mana works, like Sea, Bayou, Bayou Trop, like all these things make all your colors. So besides hitting a blue spell, of which you have 5 sources, it's fine. You also can't really afford basics, just because your mana requirements are a little too diverse with Abrupt Decay and Snapcaster, and also because you're already a bit Wasteland proof thanks to Deathright. Speaking of Wastelands, you have your own Wastelands and Strip Mines. Because the general overall plan of this deck is to attack your opponent's resources. There are games where you attack your opponent's lands with Wasteland and Strip Mines, and by misstepping their like Soul Rings or their Death Rights, or Null Rotting them, or Spell Piercing Moxes or Lotuses, you can do that. If you think that you want to attack their card draw, you have all your counter spells that do that. If you want to attack their threats, you can line up your counter spells to do that. You are just trying to pick the fights so that you can win. The other thing that attacks mana, by the way, is Abrupt Decay and Mox, which is really good. So looking at the cards, we have our threats, we have our bullet tutor targets, we have True Name for creature mirrors, Trigon for workshop decks, and situations where you can attack their mana with it. Jace is your big value guy. Snapcaster as your all-around value guy. Bob as the absurd card advantage that he is in every format that is legal, and Deathright as additional mana against Shops, Dredge Hate, and just kind of all around awesome. I'm not 100% sold on 4, but you definitely want at least 3. We then move to Creature Kill. Decays, Dismember. Dismember's again tutorable. It kills stuff like Restoration Angel. You don't need a ton, but you do want access to that effect. Null Rotting Cage as our random hate cards to tutor for. I do like the split here, even though we have Shaman or Snapcaster Mage in our deck, because oftentimes Cage will shut down more of their deck, like Yogg will plus their Snapcasters. So it's also pretty easy to play around our own cards. We can Snapcaster, get a little bit of value, and then just slam the Cage and be like, okay, we got our single 2-for-1, and that's good enough. Last 2 categories of cards, we have our interaction that just kind of handles all the random spells that you see in the format. There's nothing really too non-stock. There's no Flusterstorm because I hate that card. I think it's only very narrowly good, and often you're fighting fights over things like a Dak Faden or Jace that it just won't win any kind of fight with. You also can't afford too many Spell Pierce effects because decks in Vintage tend to be a little mana heavy, so they tend to be obsolete a little quicker, especially again with the free mana. Thoughtseize is pretty awesome, though. And then final stack is Broken Stuff. We have our Recall. One of your key routes to victory is cast Recall, recast Recall, draw a bunch of cards, keep doing things. Time Walk's very similar. And then Brainstorm is kind of a Recall, not quite. And then these cards, all they do is find Recalls, Time Walks, and Brainstorms, honestly. There's a bit of flexibility. in finding other stuff, but that's about it. Like Mystical, I think in the matches I've played this deck so far, I think I have Mystical for a non-recall card once, maybe twice. Um, I almost cut Mystical from the deck because oftentimes you were just, if you didn't have the recall and you drew the Mysticals, like, oh, that sucked. What am I supposed to do now? But in theory, you can go like Mystical Walk or like Mystical to Demonic to Snapcaster to recall or something. You can set up elaborate chains. As for the board, similarly straightforward. We have our Shops Hate, we have our Dredge Hate, we have our Creature Hate, we have our Combo Hate. There's definitely some flex, like Abrupt Decay is also good against a bunch of random things, and just any deck trying to Time Vault as well. Deluge comes in against a few other things. You can Dismember Shops too. You can GT Shops. Thoughtseize is also just all around good, especially just, on the play, you obviously want more Thoughtseize against basically everything in the format that isn't Dredge, so. Overall, this deck's just very solid. You aren't trying to outbroken anyone, which is the thing you can do. You're just playing Magic, as in your cards are all as good as they can be, and your opponent will probably draw more blanks because they're trying to set up more broken things, which will just win the fights on more because you have all the good cards.